Hi, everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion here on addressing systemic barriers in academia, pathways to action and change. My name is Delara Karan, and I will be the moderator for today's session. I am currently the chair of the National Science Policy Network Graduate Education Committee, and I'm also a Doctor of Veterinary Medicine candidate at Colorado State University. As always, please feel free to share insights and experiences that you've learned with our symposium hashtags pictured at the bottom of the slide here. And we will have Alessandra Zimmerman managing and moderating the Q&A portion. So please submit questions that you have to that Q&A chat. And now I have the honor of introducing all three of our panelists today. So Crystal Vasquez is an NSF Graduate Research Fellow in the Division of Chemistry and Chemical Engineering at California Institute of Technology. She advocates regularly for the inclusion of graduate students and researchers with disabilities and has started the website Chronically Invisible to help increase disabled representation in STEM fields. She also started the Caltech Disability Coalition, which is the first disability affinity and advocacy group on her campus. Dr. Caroline Palvestino Maggio is a research fellow in neurobiology at Harvard Medical School. She received her PhD from Rutgers University and her Bachelor's of Science from Rider College. She was recently acknowledged by Cell Press in their 100 Most Inspiring Hispanic and Latinx Scientists in America list. And she advocates for social justice and encourages young people from underrepresented backgrounds in STEM to pursue those careers. And last, we have Dr. Buffy Smith, who is the founding associate dean of the Doherty Family College at the University of St. Thomas in Minnesota. She received her Bachelor's of Arts in Sociology from Marquette University and both her Master's and PhD in Sociology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Her research interests include examining both racial and class disparities within the higher education system, and she has written on policy issues that deal with mentoring, access, retention, equity, and diversity in higher education. So you can see the full panelist bios on our Whova website, but I'm excited to get started and begin our discussions here today. So I will stop screen sharing and allow Crystal to begin sharing her slides.
Let's see. Awesome. Can everyone see this? All right, so hi everyone. As was just said, my name is Crystal and I use she, her pronouns. I identify as a disabled, queer, Latina woman scientist and also a first generation college and grad student. I'm relatively new to the advocacy and science policy space, and so I'm very happy to be here. Oops. Even though my research doesn't focus on it explicitly, as an atmospheric chemist, I find myself thinking about environmental justice a lot. Because if you know what to look for, it's pretty easy to see that the systemic oppression that creates environmental injustices, like who's more likely to live near pollution-emitting industry, also determines the spatial distribution of, say, air quality sensors or which countries host the majority of atmospheric science research. But what does environmental justice have to do with advocating against barriers in higher ed? I promise you there's a connection, and I hope it all becomes clear in a second. In the meantime, I want to go ahead and define what environmental justice is, because I found this definition quite interesting. According to the EPA, environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. Race, color, national origin, or income. What's missing from this list? Multiple things might come to mind, but I'm going to focus on one in particular. People with disabilities make up approximately 15% of the world population. To put that in perspective, that's on the order of a billion people. We are considered one of, if not the largest minority group. And we're also quite a diverse bunch, not only in terms of the types of disabilities we may have, but also the identities we intersect with. As far as environmental justice goes, we are yet another marginalized group that is disproportionately impacted by the effects of climate change. More so if we're Black, Indigenous, Latinx, transgender, or poor, which in general are groups that already have a higher prevalence of disability among them. And while progress has been made, at least in terms of research that has started to look at the impacts of climate change on these marginalized communities, disability has still been surprisingly absent from the conversation. In fact, it wasn't until July 2019 that the United Nations Human Rights Council adopted a resolution that called on governments to create disability inclusive approaches to addressing things like climate change. This was the first time, again, in 2019, that the Council had addressed the rights of disabled people as they relate to climate change. And our absence has resulted in some dire consequences, with many people with disabilities dying in things like wildfires and hurricanes because the system's just not equipped to help us. There could be whole dissertations written about how we got here and why disability has been left out of the conversation. But I mean, they're probably out there, and if they're not, they definitely need to be written. One reason I like to point to as someone in higher education is simply the lack of disabled researchers like me. Because who better to know the needs of the community than the people who are actually a part of it? According to the NSF, which is the only US STEM organization that publishes data on disability, but I digress, we represent only 10% of STEM bachelor's degrees and 6% of STEM doctoral degrees, regardless of discipline, despite making up about a quarter of the American population. Statistics I've seen from other places like the UK seem to mirror these results. And is usually the case, it's even worse for those with intersecting identities. For example, Black and Indigenous people and people of color more generally are more likely to be disabled, yet are underrepresented amongst the disabled scientists who have survived the education system. Sadly, these stats didn't surprise me. They really just confirmed the reality that I was already experiencing. When I became disabled a few years ago, grad school got so much harder. The academic environment, with its highly competitive nature and long work hours, isn't compatible with certain disabilities like mine. And if we're being honest with ourselves, it's barely compatible with most non-disabled students also. Science in particular is also incredibly ableist. For example, some higher ed research has observed that STEM professors appear to be the least likely to accommodate students with disabilities. Not to mention science classes like chemistry labs are just plain inaccessible to most. And where I am in geoscience, fieldwork rarely accommodates people with disabilities, but is often a requirement at the undergraduate level, regardless on if the student actually wants to do field research in the first place. But if you do want to do field research like I do, there are potential barriers that you have to overcome also. For example, 2 years ago in grad school, I almost couldn't participate in a field campaign because the doctor who was in charge of giving medical clearance decided that my medications and my mobility aids were a safety hazard, which, spoiler alert, that wasn't the case because after spending way too much time and energy fighting this decision, I was able to participate and remain physically unscathed. And that was also, unfortunately, my introduction to advocacy. Oops. Yes. I'm in a unique position. I'm a part of a small community of geoscientists with disabilities and an even smaller group who are open about their experiences. And so I'm trying to use this to my advantage and bridge the gap between us and the rest of the community. On the environmental justice side, I was recently chosen to be an Agents of Change Environmental Health Fellow, which is a program that aims to shape the public dialogue of environmental science and policy by giving researchers like me the opportunity to improve their writing and communication skills. The end goal of this program is going to be that I get to publish a cool online essay, and on a topic of my choice, and you best believe I'm going to bring disability into my essay. I'm also part of a couple other projects in this realm, but typically writing is my weapon of choice here. On the disability of STEM side, as was discussed earlier, I am the co-founder of the Caltech Disability Coalition. We are the first disability-focused affinity group on campus. We've only been around since summer, but even so, I feel like we've made a lot of positive change already. Not only by ensuring that disabled and chronically ill students are represented on campus, but also by educating the non-disabled allies about disability rights issues, or our biggest success so far, which was successfully advocating for Caltech to hire the first full-time accessibility specialist in the institution's history. I also created Chronically Invisible, which, as discussed, is a website where, when I have a little bit of time, I write about historical disabled scientists so that we can increase representation and talk about all the scientists that you probably never heard of in your textbooks. And finally, I'm also part of the International Association for Geoscience Diversity, or the IAGD leadership team, which is an organization that helps make geosciences, especially the fieldwork component, more accessible to students and researchers with disabilities. And they might be annoyed at me if I don't point this out, but they're also currently accepting donations for this month so they can continue their good work. And with that, I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Crystal, for being able to and willing to share your experiences. Caroline, if you are able to share your slides now.
Sure, 1 second. Okay, can you see that, my screen? Okay. Okay, so recently, wait 1 second, let me just get one. I don't know why. Okay, here it is. Okay, so recently 15 of us minoritized postdocs got together and we wrote a commentary for Cell called Patching Up the Leaks and Reimagining this leaky STEM pipeline. And what we, one of the acronyms that we used in our commentary is called PEER, which basically is persons excluded from, they're excluded from science because of ethnicity and race. And the reason why we did that purposely is because we felt that calling minoritized individuals URM doesn't really encompass the systemic, the group that is supposed to be focused on, because URM also includes women, or BIPOC. BIPOC includes other groups that are not racially minoritized individuals. So we came up with, actually, we then featured David Asaya's article from Race Matters. He's the one that came up with PEER, and we really like PEER because it's more of a scholarly term. And the groups that we're focused on are the racially minoritized individuals that have been developed specifically aimed at Black or African American, Latinx, or Hispanic Americans, American Indians, Alaska Natives, Native Hawaiians, and Native Pacific Islanders. And one of the things we focused are from undergraduate straight to faculty. And there was this recent article, the Washington Post, that talks about this, why do Latino and Black students leave STEM majors at higher rates? So what they found was that students so overall, all groups of students picked, the majority of college students picked 20% of them picked to major into STEM. However, Latino and Black students are more likely after their first year to leave the STEM fields. And here's a graph. This is from the paper from Dr. Valentine from NIH from 2016. And basically this graph just tells you, so UR is underrepresented, which encompasses Hispanic, Latinx, African American, Black, Native American, or Alaska Native, where WR is well represented, which is white and Asian. And what you see here is that the gap is just widening wider. and wider between the races when moving up the STEM pipeline. So that's one of the so we then, when we then shared our experiences through each of these stages, and this is what we talked about. So first, one of the obstacles that we saw that was very common were that students face this challenge of being the first individual in their family and communities to attend college. So a lot of students won't know, like, let's say, what a bursar's office is. So just getting acclimated to the environment is just time consuming, and also trying to gather community that they can identify with. So in order to be productive, that is also another time constraint. And so these are like a lot of obstacles that they go through. And so one of the things that we thought would be a great solution would be for students to become integrated into the academic community early on as possible, to expose students during orientation, especially minoritized students, about the possibility of doing research and having that potentially published. And this could be through either these paid internships or externship, but definitely the strong mentorship component was vital. The postgraduate and second chance, what we call the redemption period. So one another common theme was that a lot of students, because they started their undergraduate in STEM, a lot of them they come from underperforming schools. So when you major in biology, the rigor of those courses, they're not up to par for that. So then by the time they finish college, they'll have a much lower GPA than anticipated. And then that constitutes to them not applying further on, either to going on to the next level. And so a lot of students also think that a lot of us didn't know that you had to have a master's degree in order to get your PhD. So that's also been a myth amongst of us minoritized scientists, young scholars. And so one of the solutions that we talked about for this time period would be to set up like a successful post-bac program, an internal program where the individual is already, like, let's say they're already at the school, at the university. Why not set up a program where you can streamline their application, but have like some sort of redemption period or limbo period in the middle where they can show their potentials and also be able to retake some of those classes that they didn't do initially well on. During the graduate phase, this was actually very interesting, because a lot of students, they felt that if they would have known that you have to pick, let's say, a dissertation committee or a qualifying committee, these are things that they would have known from if they would have known this from orientation, these are things that they could already start potentially building relationships with faculty from the get-go, and just having faculty know of minoritized students as well, and just having that extra diversity training, and then also approach minoritized students. And so what we found was that if you can have students learn about these different themes that happen in graduate phase, like the qualifying phase and the dissertation phase, and what that constitutes, like it would have been so much more helpful. And also getting acclimated to the scientific community as far as grant writing, and also the importance of publication. And one of the solutions we felt were that these graduate programs and institutions, they must promote funding opportunities. So for example, a lot of us had similar funding opportunities of this Alfred P. Sloan scholarship. And this money actually helped many minoritized individuals who are found in low income, let's say low income housing. So these backup funds that a lot of us received in school helped us to overcome those obstacles. And also this high quality mentoring, right? Whereas people are then focused on more that you go on to the next level, and not so much that you're in their lab because they can apply for funding. There's also a personal support community of strong scientific influencers. We found that the people who open doors for us the most have been strong science influencers that have had a seat on the table and do talk about helping and supporting minoritized individuals. And also what we also found was really helpful was that the institutions also have the faculty do diversity, what we call a diversity training or cultural sensitive training in order to avoid a lot of these uncomfortable conversations. Sure, during the postdoc phase, this seems to be the pivotal point in STEM. So a lot of postdocs, because by the time you become a postdoc, you are already so, there's just so small number of us, like there's a lot of lack of diversity. And so a lot of us do go experience this time of isolation. So we believe that because the postdoc period, you're you're subjected only to your PI and not have, like in graduate school, you have a committee of for your dissertation and for your qualifying exam, but for your postdoc phase, you're only subjected to one person. So we felt that if for a minoritized individual, because they don't often have that common table talk, it would be important for them to set up like advisory committees, so kind of like what the K99, the Mosaic Grant has you do, where they have this K99, like an outside advisory committee that you can then ask them for either support letters or just in general, just for that advocacy and that extra mentorship. And we think that also having some type of transition to faculty in place will also be very helpful, in that if you have minoritized postdocs already in your institutions, why not build a program where you start training those individuals if they want to continue in academia, and have them, already give them like some sort of startup. It's kind of like a K99 mechanism, but except they'll be internally. So, and the point of this is not having to leave the pipeline and then come back in, because that's where we see that where the most leakiness is. And to just finalize our paper, we went through like what we figured that would strengthen what our thoughts were about the leaky pipeline. So for the undergraduate phase, we felt that early exposure was definitely key, letting minoritized individuals know during orientation week of these possibilities, and having it open up to everyone, and not just relationships that professors and students that they develop, let's say, but just having some type of early exposure research where everyone can benefit from. Also having a bridge to doctorate program. If the minoritized individual is already there and you have a graduate school, and if they want to go to graduate school, why not streamline their application or have some type of agreement where they can, further show that they can do the work, that they can do the courses. But then in the end, maybe if they want to finish, or let's say like get a master's degree or whatever, but at least have the individuals choose, and it'll just be less of a leakiness. And also the doctorate level and the postdoc level, we felt that again, just having these awareness of funding opportunities like the K99, and during the doctorate, we also have this funding mechanism that it's called the F99 KOO. I know a big champion of this has been Michelle Jones London over at NINDS. And basically what it is to keep minoritized individuals in the pipeline. So as a doctorate student, as a senior doctorate student, you can apply for this grant funding, and you'll have funding during your postdoc phase. And so that makes you a more attractive candidate to go into higher power labs. And finally, getting to the faculty phase for postdocs, having these career transition awards is key. And also having this bridges to faculty programs. If the faculty in your department can host you, that would be great. And then they can, sort of what we call grooming into knowing how to, because once you start a faculty position, there's a 10-year clock. So a lot of us minoritized individuals do not know of this. So I think just training them early on and just having them aware of, once they leave that postdoc phase and they start faculty, how does that look like in time constraints and things like that, as far as getting to the 10-year position. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Caroline, for sharing that. And Alessandra was kind enough to link that paper that Caroline was talking about into the chat if you're interested. So now, Buffy, if you are able to share your slides, that would be great.
Thank you. Can everyone see that and hear me? Okay. So first, I would just like to express my deep gratitude to Brianna and Delara and the entire NSP and team for creating this symposium and for the invitation to me to be able to uh, sit on this wonderful panel with two amazing scholars, Crystal and Caroline. So I appreciate that. I also would love to just express gratitude to the entire NSP and family. The more I get to know about your wonderful network, the more I'm impressed with you powerful researchers who are also advocates for social justice. You actually do.
Buffy, quickly before you start, could you maximize the presentation to show the whole?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Is everything okay now?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Delara. I appreciate that. And so I just wanted to thank everyone who's part of the NSP and family for being you in terms of using your research to make a difference in terms of policies and programs to advance the common good through your profession. Speaking of the common good, that is exactly what I would like to talk about in terms of our talk today. In 2014, I was part of a team of faculty at the University of St. Thomas who got together to talk about what would a two-year college look like. And so we embarked on this journey to think about how we could sort of close the opportunity gap in higher education. And so in 2017, we enrolled our first scholars at Dougherty Family College. And I want to say Dougherty Family College is one of 8 colleges of the University of St. Thomas. And the University of St. Thomas is a Catholic institution, and it's the largest private institution in the state of Minnesota. So the Dougherty Family College offers an affordable, rigorous liberal arts associate degree program to promising young scholars who want to earn a 4-year degree. We are very intentional to make sure that we provide the academic, social, and career skills and resources our scholars need to be successful in terms of their academic and career success. At DFC, we are committed to serving scholars who demonstrate a high financial need and who have at least a 2.5 GPA. The demographics of our scholars are indicated. 96% of our scholars are identify as scholars of color. 87% are eligible for Pell Grants. So at DFC, we're intentional about trying to improve college access, supports, and persistence. So in terms of access, it was very important, of course, to have create a financial model, a tuition model, where our scholars would be able to attend a private institution. So our scholars who have demonstrate the highest financial need only pay a little over $1,000 per academic year. In terms of access, we also wanted to make sure not only did they have access to a 2-year associate degree program, but we also wanted them to have access to a 4-year degree program. So if they continue at St. Thomas and they have at least a 2.5 GPA, there's an automatic admission to our 4-year program. We're also mindful that still, because of real financial hardships, some scholars cannot attend their 4-year, continue to get their 4-year degree at St. Thomas. So we were very intentional to make sure our curriculum was aligned with the Minnesota Transfer Curriculum Guidelines, which allows them opportunity to go to any state college or university in Minnesota. We also, in terms of access, provide our DFC graduates, they can compete for full and partial scholarships based on their GPA. So that's access. Well, we know access is important, but also supports and persistence are important when you're trying to close the opportunity gap. We know in terms of the research that we have to create an environment, a learning environment where sense of belonging, where our scholars feel that they are not imposters and that they actually can be perceived as scholars of the higher education system. So we are very intentional to create that culture of sense of belonging. We also want our content that we deliver for our scholars to reflect their lived experiences, their rich and diverse cultural background. And so our faculty are very intentional to make sure they practice culturally relevant or sustaining pedagogy. We have all of our scholars participate in a cohort model, and so they take all of their classes for the full 2 years together, and this helps create a sense of community. We require mentoring, one-on-one appointments and group mentoring with their faculty and staff mentors. Once again, this supports their overall sense of belonging and helps with the persistence rate. Our scholars also participate in addition to their academics, a career development program. This program will help them in terms of building resumes, mock interviews. If they complete successfully this professional development program, they are eligible to participate in a paid internship program with our partners. Our partners have to pay our scholars at least $15 an hour for their participation in their workspace. Some of our partners include 3M, US Bank, Target, to just name a few. We also knew that there were some practical supports we had to provide our scholars, free textbooks, laptops, 2 meals, and a Metro Pass. So we're trying to make sure we address some of the issues that we know our scholars need in terms of navigating and mastering the formal curriculum. But we also know that in order to be successful in college, you have to master the hidden curriculum as well. So in terms of the hidden curriculum, simply that just refers to the unwritten norms, values, expectations, codes of behavior that scholars have to adhere to in order to thrive in college. For example, when a scholar receives a low grade in an exam, it's very important for them to know that, yes, it's important to meet with the professor, but how do they talk to the professor once they have received that low grade to make sure that they're respectful and that they're engaging in an effective communication style, that they get the most out of that meeting and still continue to build that relationship. So we try to intentionally do role playing with our scholars, help them write out scripts to feel more confident, and so that they will not feel like an imposter, and that once again, they can feel like they can own that space within the college system. We know that the hidden curriculum reflects the cultural norms, values, and expectations of the middle class, educators and stakeholders in higher education. Since many of our scholars do not come from middle class background, we know we have to be very intentional of helping our scholars understand those norms and giving them the tools that will equip them to feel confident that they can navigate those norms. The hidden curriculum is not common sense. It is culturally bound, but we know that it can be rebuilt. We try to make sure that, especially in our first year experience class, that we spend a lot of time talking about the hidden curriculum. So what have been some of our achievements as to date? Remember, we started in 2017, so we have had 2 graduating classes. Our retention, our recent retention last year was 71%. This is good in terms of looking at other data compared to 2-year colleges, but our goal is to have a higher retention rate in the upper 80%. That is our target. In terms of our graduation rate, within 2 years, our second class was 65%, our first class was 50%. Once again, if you compare to the 2-year colleges of Minnesota, as also the 2-year colleges across the nation, the average graduation rate, and they report 3 years, not 2 years, but 3 years, is in a little above 30%. So once again, we have doubled that, and that's good, but we always want to strive to do better. And our goal is to be in the 80% range. In terms of our internship placement, as to date, we have 81% have been eligible for, of our scholars have been eligible for a paid internship program. Once again, because we know that we want to prepare them for academic success, but also career success, we would like for that number to be 90% as well. Part of our mission, once again, is not only to help our scholars earn their first degree in terms of a liberal arts sort of associate degree program, but we are also intentional to help them know that we want them to strive to earn their bachelor's degree. To date, we have 136 scholars, 136 graduates, 73.5% of our graduates, total graduates, are currently enrolled in a 4-year degree program. From our first graduating class, we have about 11 scholars who are on track to graduate at the end of this academic year. And those are the scholars that have went on to continue with a sort of a liberal arts major. For our scholars who are going into more STEM majors and business, they're on track. The other 20 are on track to graduate the following academic year. So it's going to be about a 5-year graduation rate for them. What we're certainly proud about is that our scholars feel a strong sense of belonging. This is largely due to the mentoring and the connections they have with their faculty and staff mentors, and of course their peers in the cohort model. What we know in terms of predictors of success at DFC is that there has been an increased contact with DFC faculty and staff mentors has certainly helped our scholars achieve success and to stay on track for graduation, as well as when there's an increased use of the Scholars Resource Center, including tutoring, personal counseling, and academic and career counseling. And I will stop there and just say that I hope by looking at the DFC model, it will serve as an example that when you combine your research and your passion, you really can create systemic changes in terms of policies and programs that can really advance the common good. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you all so much, panelists. That was really, we're lucky to have such unique perspectives here and from across sort of the career stages, graduate student, postdoc, and faculty. I think that's really valuable. So I'm going to start with just one question to pose to all of you, and then we have a few specific questions that have come in. But as always, please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A portion, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. And panelists, if you'd like to open your cameras up now too, so we can have your faces on screen. So with recent racial justice movements and sort of this revived desire to create diversity, inclusion, and equity committees and initiatives on campus, how do we really ensure that these committees aren't just serving as a performative role, but they're actively working to create systemic changes on campuses? And what does that look like to all of you? Maybe Buffy, would you like to start with that?
Thank you. That's a very good question. Reflecting on that question, I think that all colleges should set DEI goals. Once those goals are set, I think the next step should be, how would we measure success that we have achieved these DEI goals? Then in terms of making sure we achieve those goals and then those measurements, there needs to be internal and external accountability partners. That's within the college, but I also think in terms of partners outside of the college. But I do think faculty and staff and even scholars will need to own what those goals are and to hold one another accountable. But in terms of to make sure that there are university goals, there needs to be recognition and rewards by university leadership. So if it's part of, for faculty, part of the tenure process, we're more likely to achieve those goals. If it's part of any type of, for staff, a part of the promotion process, we're more likely to achieve those goals. When scholars feel that DEI is serious and it's part of the college culture, and that it's talked about in terms of student leadership clubs, we're more likely to achieve those goals. And then ultimately, I think if, as a university, if we're really concerned about achieving those goals and having real success in DEI objectives, it has to be part of our larger sort of campaign. Capital campaigns are usually based on what are the top priorities of the university. So if the top priorities of the universities truly are aligned with DEI sort of goals and initiatives, then when the development teams of every respective college, when they are aligning their dollars and the goals of their donors around those around that mission, I think you will see real results. And then I think it will no longer be performative, but it's part of the core identity of that university.
Crystal or Carolyn, yeah, do you have any other thoughts to add to that?
Yeah, I think what Dr. Smith was saying was on point. Definitely have a climate survey, what we call a climate survey in DI work, and just survey each department. I think should focus on that and survey their department to see where, to see what individuals, what groups what sort of hardships they're experiencing. It's important for leadership to know that because leadership is on a position of power in making these sort of, they can approve support mechanisms that can help these minoritized individuals. I think that DEI work has to be part. So now that search committees are looking for faculty, this has to, the fact that faculty is responsible for not just one race, but they're responsible for everyone and minoritized individuals, I think they should be held accountable in showing some type of like promotion or some type of like they're actually doing some type of contribution to DEI work and not just, it will help also this, the laboratory environment. It creates a much more inclusive environment if everyone, that incoming faculty, the young incoming faculty, also not only has great science, but also has done their part in contributing to DEI works. Another that I completely agree with Dr. Smith was the 10-year process. The 10-year process, they also have to take into account whether or not that faculty have some type of accountability for faculty, had they contributed to DEI work, have they done their part in supporting individuals from minoritized backgrounds, and not, it doesn't have to be that they have to go out and have a sign or any protest, but it's just hosting a student of minoritized background and then not having them master out, but yes, finish with the PhD. I think holding them accountable, because I've seen a lot of individuals that are friends of mine who started a PhD program and actually ended up mastering out because of a toxic environment. And I think a lot of it is just not lack of common table talk. That I think, and all of that could be prevented with just having, and it's not even the faculty's fault, I think it's the university and leadership role in educating faculty on diversity training and also cultural sensitivity, the same way they do with Title IX. I think this is just as important. So that's my.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that was just said. From a student side, I feel like students don't feel like they have the power to hold these types of committees accountable. And I blatantly disagree with that. Like even something small like sending emails to the committee members. If they do something wrong, then send an email to them, explain why it's wrong, and then CC the rest of the student body. Like these are just like small little ripples that will make sure that like you get to demand transparency, ask them for meeting notes, ask them for their goals and timelines and deliverables, and have those somewhere that you can like point to and everyone can see them in the community. It was already mentioned about tenured faculty, and I 100% agree with that. But for students on these committees, finding a way to make sure that their time is paid for, if not monetarily because there's no funding, then maybe there can be some kind of like class that gives them units towards their degree progress. Or if you can find the funding, one suggestion that's kind of been floating around Caltech but hasn't taken any ground is having kind of like a teaching assistantship, but instead like an outreach or advocacy assistantship, so that students are paid for this time that's being taken away from their teaching requirements or their research requirements. Yeah, thanks.
Those are some really great and insightful thoughts and ideas I hadn't heard about, potentially supporting graduate students for outreach work in a fellowship type opportunity. I think that's a really good compromise type of solution for that. I'm going to get to a couple questions now in the Q&A that are a little more specific. So we have a couple questions here, Buffy, about scaling of your sort of 2-year program and sort of what, and anyone who has commentary on how to scale pipeline programs to be on a larger front, you know, what kinds of funding sources are needed, administrative buy-in, and things of that nature.
Beautiful question. It's a question that we think about. I would say the model right now works with a total of 300 scholars. So that's our recruitment goal is always 150 each class. And so when you think of scale, and I certainly understand that question in terms of a larger impact, but we also, to full transparency, our model, financial model is based primarily on philanthropy. And so that is something to consider in terms of how. So most colleges are generate revenue through their credits. The more scholars you have, the more credits you have, the more revenue you have. Because this college was designed in terms of mission focus, we have our generous board of trustees, our advisory board, and friends and family of DFC came together to make a substantial financial commitment to start a large endowment for this college. So if we increase scale, we'll have to always be mindful of how will we pay for this. So our tuition for our scholars is $15,000. That's $15,000. That is still a fraction of cost of what it costs to go to the St. Thomas 4-year program. But $15,000 is what it costs to earn this degree. When scholars, because the majority of our scholars are coming in and they are eligible for Pell Grant, they max out on their Pell Grant, they max out on their state grant. And if they're a DACA student, they can still get state grant even though they can't get Pell. But then the rest of that, their tuition is covered by a DFC scholarship that we have to fundraise for. And then, of course, the other, like I said, the most, our scholars that need the most financial assistance, they pay out of pocket on average a little over $500 per semester. The reason why we can keep that cost low is because we have generous donors. If we scale up, we'll have to get more donors. And that is a question of sustainability. The best that we hope to do also at this time is to hopefully other colleges, universities will think of DFC as a model and that they will replicate. So at this time, if we don't know how long there's a certain goal we have in terms of endowment to make sure it's sustainable, but that's still at 300. If we scale it, we will have to ask ourselves, can we get a larger donor base for that? But I think if other colleges and universities could replicate it, then we could serve more scholars in more communities and still contribute to the larger goal, which is to close the opportunity gap. A great question.
Specifically for you, Crystal, somebody asked that given the wide range of disabilities and accommodations that disabled scientists require, what is your recommendation for the best interventions to help improve retention, since it's not really a one-size-fits-all?
So there's this concept of universal design learning. There's a whole bunch of different categories of it, but it's basically trying to build basic accommodations into your curriculum before anyone even asks for them. So having, say, making sure that in a chemistry lab, the fume hoods, there's at least 1 or 2 that accommodate someone using a wheelchair or someone who can't stand for long periods of time. And then when you have those things built in, then you can start dedicating resources to people who have more specific accommodation needs. And then you can also try and figure out how to train faculty, because I feel like sometimes faculty, when they see a student with accommodation, they freak out because they're like, oh my gosh, how am I supposed to change my class to fit this person's needs? Or alternatively, they're like, this isn't really needed. Like, it's probably not a big deal if they don't have it. And just having some kind of training to be like, okay, if you get this type of accommodation, this is how you can change it. You don't have to change your whole curriculum, just change this one aspect. Or also training being like, accommodations are not special treatment. They are required for a person to be on the level playing field. So yeah, building in universal design, asking your disabled students. I do like the idea of climate surveys and making sure that they have their needs met. Communicating with disability offices on campus. They're understaffed and underpaid, but they're also underutilized. And I think that if you start utilizing these offices, maybe the university will start putting funding towards these types of things.
And going off then your point, you mentioned the climate surveys again. This was one question, and I think all of you might have good insight onto this. How can we more broadly encourage institutions to actually conduct climate surveys? Oftentimes, I think it's student-led initiatives trying to gain sort of a pulse on the graduate student population, but how do we really ensure that that's something coming from the top down as well? Caroline, maybe if you want to start.
I think a lot of this is funding. I think that if NIH has some type of criteria or says, okay, we're not, because the institutions get a lot of money from NIH. So if they hold institutions accountable and say, you know, we're not going to give, you know, your institution X amount of millions unless we see some type of climate survey and that all your students and everyone's is treated properly and that the proper support mechanisms are in place if there is a situation happening. I think through that will definitely motivate any institution to rapidly come up with a climate survey. It's just, so I think having that, and it would make sense for NIH to do this because they are using taxpayer money, right? And taxpayer money is contributed from everyone. So I think that having universities, all universities, private and public, accountable for a climate survey for them to submit, it's kind of like, so colleges ask high schools for what called college profile. So it's having them, like institutions, sort of submit some type of profile or climate survey that NIH, either they provide as a guideline or something. There has to be some type of structure and accountability in that level, I believe. And I believe that's where the change happens.
So to kind of build off that too, what kind of elements or policies on an institutional level do you think could help increase transparency and sort of this idea of the hidden curriculum and sort of revealing the hidden curriculum on a more policy level, especially keeping in mind our, you know, NSPN membership, graduate students, postdocs are really interested in knowing what the hidden curriculum, sort of what your guys' thoughts are on the hidden curriculum for graduate students and how to kind of reveal that more effectively. Maybe Crystal, do you have input sort of as a student, what you perceived as what's hidden and not hidden and how we can improve that?
Yeah, so I'm thinking back because no one in my family finished college. So everything was brand new. I believe Caroline mentioned this in her talk, but terminology, she mentioned the bursar's account. Didn't really know what that was in college. For grad school, didn't know what a fellowship was, didn't know I could get paid to do research. Almost didn't come to grad school because I was like, I don't have the money and I can't take any more loans than I already have. Also things like how to write a paper and get published. I felt really uncomfortable going up to my PI and being like, hey, I wrote this paper that took me forever because I have no gauge on how I'm supposed to do this. And now I have all these comments from the peer reviewers. How do I respond to them? And like, yeah, how do I not seem like I don't know what I'm doing, kind of thing. I don't really know what you can do about that except for just educating faculty that having them realize that they don't come from the same backgrounds that a lot of students come from, and things that they may seem as, or they may think is kind of common knowledge isn't actually that common to a lot of their students. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with wholeheartedly with Crystal. In terms of my background, I grew up in inner city Milwaukee, raised by a single mom. We lived in public housing and received public assistance. So navigating undergrad and graduate school was a mystery for me. So when I was in grad school, I know it's been a while, but when I was in grad school, there would be some graduate school sort of seminars, like for first year graduates. I don't know if they still have that, but I think that would be something to shape to shape it in a way that we could talk about all of the things that Crystal identified and that Caroline has identified earlier for at the different levels, at the first year graduate year, second year, third year, the real problem that Caroline identified in terms of mastering out. Why are they leaving at the master's level and not advancing to the PhD level, and postdoc, right? So at every level, there is a new culture, right, that you're being exposed to. And so then when you become an assistant professor, that's another new level of the hidden curriculum. An associate degree professor, a new level. Even as a full professor, there are new things you're still learning and have to navigate. And I can tell you, as being now doing more administration, I'm still asking the same questions I did as an undergrad. But I do think if we are intentional about making it part of the structure, so then I don't have to out myself every time I'm in a new setting that, this environment is new to me. If we just talk about things in terms of the terminology, if we always explain instead of saying NSPN, but just say what it is, so we don't have to assume, so we don't divide each other in terms of those that are part of our group, the in-group, and those that are outside, and that's exclusive. But it will happen through education, through a mindset. And I do believe the more we have these conversations, the more I think faculty are going to be aware, because just in terms of demographics, we're going to have a more diverse in every arena of scholars at the undergraduate and the grad school. And then, of course, it's going to happen in terms of our faculty ranks as well, and in terms of our administration ranks. And so the more that we're explicit, and that's all we're asking, is not to assume anything. Don't assume that everyone has had your lived experience. And the more that we can put that as part of in all of our classes and in all of our meetings, that's how we really change the system from within. So I'm hopeful. I know we have a long way to go, but I am hopeful that I think we're beginning to have some of those intentional and explicit conversations. But I would just say this with all of the scholar activists that are part of NSPN. To tap into your wounds, those areas where you have felt marginalized, you feel where there was misunderstanding, you felt excluded, use that as your source for your passion of where you're going to make the change, where you're going to make that policy change, because that is something that you can use to benefit not only you, but those that come after you. So don't shy away from it. Don't be ashamed of it. Embrace it and know that you're not the only one going through that. And that the reason why you had to go through it is for you to combine your pain with your skills. You get your passion, you get your purpose, and you change policies and programs to advance the common good.
That was the perfect empowering note to sort of end on here. In the last like minute or so that we have, Caroline or Crystal, do you have any other, parting thoughts about really how to navigate conversations about these barriers with mentors, or help leverage, all these programs that are available to help really enhance career success?
Yeah, really quick for students, be bold. Put yourself out there. Don't be ashamed of getting the resources that are given to you from college campus. Yeah.
I agree. I think students at all levels need to advocate for themselves and just not be afraid to ask for support mechanisms, because these schools have it and they have the funding for it. It's just that no one has been, asking for it. I think just having that conversation of what is going on is really important. But yeah, definitely. This way you can consider everyone. But yeah.
Well, thank you again to all three of you for providing your perspectives, of being willing to share your own personal experiences on these barriers. I know we have a long way to go, but hopefully we're all empowered to sort of start thinking more critically about what the academic system looks like and how we can change it. So thank you all again.